This is the second part of this two-part episode of California, the US Explained. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I strongly encourage you to do so first. If you have, I'll give a quick recap. We've explored California's vastly different regions, from its deserts to its snow-capped peaks, agricultural valleys, and lush redwood forests. We learned about how it was one of the most linguistically diverse and densely populated parts of the continent before the arrival of Europeans. We learned how both Spain and Britain lay claim to it, and after hundreds of years of ignoring the region, how Spain built a string of missions and colonial towns up its coast, how Russia built a settlement of its own, and how Spain eventually lost its North American possessions to an independent Mexico. But now, after war with the United States, the vast territory of Alta California was signed over to the westwardly expanding U.S. at the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Hello and welcome to That Is Interesting. I'm your host, Carter. This is the U.S. Explained, Episode 32, California, Part 2. If you enjoy what I do here, please consider subscribing. As you can imagine, producing a long-running show like the US Explained takes a lot of work. I spent a month traveling California, collecting footage for this two-part episode, and another month writing each script. The more people these videos are able to reach, the easier that all becomes. By liking and hyping my videos, leaving comments, and sharing these episodes with people you think will enjoy them, you all help make the US Explained possible. Just 9 days before Mexico signed the treaty, a man named James Marshall found something. Had news spread quicker of his discovery, Mexico would likely have been even less willing to sign over Alta California. Swiss immigrant Johann Sutter, or John Sutter, had bought a large land grant in the Central Valley and built a trading post called Sutter's Fort at the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers. Reusing a number of old buildings from the now-defunct Russian Fort Ross, which he had since purchased. With American settlers starting to make their way across the Sierra Nevada into Alta California, Sutter's Fort was becoming an important stop, marking the end of the California Trail. If the U.S. took control, he figured, even more Americans would come to California and pass his fort. They'd need houses, and houses would need wood. In the small but strategic port town of Yerba Buena, recently renamed San Francisco, Sutter could sell this lumber. He hired a recent American immigrant, a carpenter named James Marshall, to build and run a sawmill along the American River in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, at a site called Coloma. Out at the mill site, watching as his men dug a ditch, Marshall caught sight of something as they dug, a piece of gold in the water. At first it was no big deal. One piece of gold is just a lucky discovery, but as more of Marshall's mill workers started to look for themselves, they kept finding more. It became pretty clear. There was gold all over the American River. In fact, it was all throughout the Sierra Nevada. Word spread quite a bit slower in 1848 than it does today, especially in the mountains of the Sierra, but news eventually made its way to San Francisco, and in the little port town, a frenzy erupted. Most of the townspeople left, flocking to the mountains. They squatted, often on land that wasn't theirs, and began digging. And these miners were finding enough gold that the fever only kept rising. In the military possession, soldiers deserted their posts, and after one officer brought a case of gold back to Washington, it was plain as day for anyone to see. There was gold in them there hills. President Polk, eager to promote the successes of his controversial war, mentioned it in his State of the Union address. Before Marshall's fateful discovery, California was home to around 150,000 native people, just around 8,000 Mexican Californios, now American citizens, and just about 6,000 others, mostly white, English-speaking American immigrants who'd arrived via the California Trail. In 1849, news of California gold had spread like wildfire, both in the cities of the East Coast and around the world. Headline after headline dominated major newspapers, and almost immediately, people began heading to California to strike it rich. At first they came from Oregon, Mexico, and even Hawaii. Immigrants came from the mining regions of Peru, Chile, and the Mexican state of Sonora. Australians and New Zealanders came. British, Italian, German, and French immigrants. Many were Jewish. Tens of thousands of immigrants crossed the Pacific from China, giving the region a huge Chinese population. Most were Cantonese speakers from the south of China in Guangdong and Hong Kong. About a third of the prospectors were immigrants. Most, though, came from other parts of the United States. The densely populated East Coast, the southern states, the quickly growing Midwest, hundreds of thousands of Americans packed up their belongings, left their homes, and set off to strike it rich out west, particularly from states like New York, Massachusetts, Ohio, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and Maine. 70,000 people flocked to this gold country in just 1849, nicknamed 49ers. By 1853, 300,000 new arrivals had come to California, on top of the 150,000 native people who already lived there. It was, and would remain, the largest gold rush in world history. About half came by sea. From the port cities of the East Coast, they sailed to Mexico, crossed there by land, did the same in the dense jungles of Panama, or sailed around South America altogether, taking the treacherous Drake's Passage between Cape Horn and Antarctica. The other half came by land. The California Trail, which just a few wagon trains had until then traveled on, was now a major route west. Along with it, the Oregon Trail and Mormon Trail, as well as southern routes like the Santa Fe Trail and Gila Trail, were bringing hundreds of thousands to California. These western trails not only flooded California with new settlers, but transformed the states they passed through forever. Forts, trading posts, and stops along the way developed into bustling towns. Horses and cattle ate so many grasses that the grazing patterns of bison herds were altered significantly, impacting life for Native Americans in the region. And with increased U.S. attention in areas along the route, the country often waged long and contentious wars against the native nations of the West, eventually forcing them onto far smaller reservations of land. The impact on the Native Americans of California was particularly devastating. Although across the United States, conflicts between indigenous people and white settlers, as well as the U.S. government, often had catastrophic results for the country's native tribes, the years during the gold rush were such a bloody era for California's Native Americans that it's often dubbed the California Genocide. Along with the spread of disease and seizure of land, miners and new settlers often massacred native people in cold blood. In brutal attacks on often peaceful villages like one at Humboldt Bay, thousands, perhaps over 10,000, native Californians were killed by miners and settlers. In just 2 decades, due to this genocide as well as disease, 80% of California's once enormous pre-gold rush native population were killed. By 1855, just a few years after the gold rush had begun, most of the California gold had been found. The gold that did remain was blasted out by dynamite or washed out with jets of water, devastating natural landscapes of the Sierra Nevada. These methods also took larger crews. No longer was it likely for a lone prospector to strike it rich. Some people did. John Sutter and James Marshall were not among them. Most did not. Famously, businessmen who sold supplies to the prospectors, like Levi Strauss, a Jewish immigrant from Germany, did at times become successful. Though he sold all kinds of goods, it was Levi's blue jeans that he would become best known for. The big winner was San Francisco. Before 1848, just a few hundred people lived in the small port town. By 1850, it was nearing 30,000 and growing fast. The gold rush turned it immediately into California's largest city. With gold in the Sierra Nevada and some half of all 49ers arriving by ship, San Francisco was where they would dock, the first place these new Californians would set foot. It became a booming center of business, the port of entry connecting California to the rest of the world. Through the thin strait into the San Francisco Bay, given the name the Golden Gate, immigrants and American settlers arrived for the first time in this new land of opportunity, seeking a California dream that many others would continue to go west for long after the gold rush ended. From there, they'd go to gold country itself, while many settled in mining camps and boom towns like Nevada City, Grass Valley, Auburn, Sonora, Placerville, Jackson, and Coloma. The jumping off point to gold country was Sutter's Fort. Sutter himself was ruined financially by the gold rush, his lands taken over by squatting prospectors. But his son, John Sutter Jr., founded a town surrounding the fort. He called the riverside city Sacramento, and this gateway to gold country boomed, becoming the second largest city in California. The gold rush, too, fast-tracked California's path to statehood. When it began, California had just been transferred into American hands. It was such a recent addition that it didn't even have a territorial government yet. This newly won possession of the United States was, during the outset of the gold rush, still governed by a succession of military governors. U.S. territories typically needed 60,000 residents before they were considered for statehood, but California, not even yet a territory, was already home to 92,000 people, more than any of the country's existing territories and even two of its states, Delaware and Florida. With a large and rapidly growing population, the military governor held a convention of delegates in Monterey. They agreed that the state should not include all of the massive former Alta California. Nearly all of the new settlers lived either in or west of the Sierra, and they saw no reason for a state whose boundaries stretched east of the mountains. The only other major population center in Alta California was the area around the Great Salt Lake, where Mormon settlements were growing in isolation from the rest of the country they had hoped to escape. Preferring a large Mormon-majority western state called Deseret, Mormon pioneers had no interest in being a part of California. And so a thin California from the Sierra Nevada to the Pacific, the boundaries we know today, came to Congress for statehood. Congress had struggled for decades to agree on how to break up the lands of the Louisiana Purchase. Northern and Southern factions in particular argued over whether or not to allow slavery in these new states and territories. More states meant more members of Congress, and the possibility for one side or the other of the controversy of the time to gain control of the legislature could spell the end of slavery or of any chance for abolition. The last few states to enter the Union had done so through a series of uneasy compromises, allowing neither side to have a clear win. The last of these, the Compromise of 1850, would bring California into the Union. California was a mining, not an agricultural land, and though these miners came from both the North and South, as well as from around the world, they had absolutely no appetite for making California a slave state. While it would admit a new free state, purchase Texas's western claims, taking them away from possible slave state control, and ban the slave trade in Washington, D.C., the Compromise of 1850 also gave two major wins to the pro-slavery South. Two new territories were carved out of the lands of the Mexican cession, called Utah and New Mexico. Each would be able to allow slavery. Finally, it passed the egregious Fugitive Slave Act, which meant that enslaved people who had escaped the free states were still considered property and could be captured and returned south. With that, on September 9, 1850, President Millard Fillmore signed the Compromise of 1850 and admitted California into the Union as the 31st state. With less than 2 years in U.S. control before it became a state, California remains to this day the quickest state ever admitted to the Union. Its capital was moved from Monterey to another location, sitting on the San Francisco Bay, where so many people were entering the state, San Jose. The legislature tried two other Bay Area cities, both on the Carquinez Strait, Vallejo, named for General Mariano Vallejo, the neighboring Benicia, named for his wife, before deciding on and sticking with the state's second largest city, Sacramento, as the capital in 1854. Between the fast-growing San Francisco Bay and the Sierra Nevada mining towns where so many people lived, it sat at the time in the heart of California's population. With the gold rush over, some miners went home. Some crossed the Sierras into Nevada, where a silver deposit had been discovered called the Comstock Lode. Others made their way to other smaller gold finds in California, where boom towns like Bodie sprung up, often fading into abandonment after the gold was all mined. Today, California has over 300 ghost towns, second to only Texas. Others were joined in California by their families. Most stayed. After all, there were now some 379,000 people living in the Golden State. The new state already had more residents than 7 other states, including several of the original 13 colonies. For these entrepreneurial fortune seekers, there were still riches to be made on the West Coast. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of California at the time was the fact that it was connected to the rest of the country by only a handful of treacherous mountain trails. there were no railroads, no roads, no easy connection to the rest of the United States. Communication occurred via the Pony Express, a mail delivery service between Sacramento and St. Joseph, Missouri. It was almost an exclave, a remote colony. Between it and the closest other U.S. state, Texas, were sparsely populated desert territories. Maybe Alaska and Hawaii are good modern analogies to how 1850s and 60s California operated, if there was no such thing as air travel. It was incredibly difficult, a long, arduous, and often dangerous journey to get there, and because of that, California in those years had little connection to the rest of the country. Like our two modern, far-off states, it developed a strongly independent identity. The state, which briefly had been home to an independent republic and for decades had, at times successfully, sought independence from Mexico, continued to maintain a fierce sense of self that it possesses to this day. The Compromise of 1850 that had brought California into the Union did little to address the underlying tensions threatening to sever that union in two. John C. Fremont, who'd been elected one of the state's first two senators, had been nominated by the new Republican Party as their first ever nominee for president in 1856. Fremont lost but came in second, cementing the anti-slavery party as one of the country's two major political parties. In 1860, the Republican nominee Abraham Lincoln won, and a number of southern states seceded from the Union as a result. After a conflict over control of South Carolina's Fort Sumter, civil war was underway. California had been settled by Americans of all stripes, but the clear majority had come from northern states. In 1860, just as many Californians were born in New York alone as were born in the entirety of the country's southern states. Besides New York, the other states where California's settlers had primarily come from included the northeastern states of Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Maine, and the midwestern states of Ohio and Missouri. Only one of these, the western jumping-off point of Missouri, allowed slavery, and it had remained with the Union. On top of that, a third of Californians were immigrants from China, Mexico, and Europe. The state, which had outlawed slavery at its inception, chose to remain with the Union. While most Californians lived in the north of the state, Southern California remained a more rural frontier. Trails through the Southwest connected it to the states of the South, and at the time, most of Southern California's Anglo settlers had come from southern states. The rural region, Los Angeles in particular, became a hotbed of secessionism, while the far more populous North was pro-Union. The state even foiled a plot by Southern sympathizers to force the secession of California and Oregon as a so-called Pacific Republic. While no battles were fought in California, the Union fortified the important state, constructing a number of forts and defenses in case of a potential invasion. Many Californians served in the Union Army and pushed the Confederates out of the new secessionist territory they'd formed in New Mexico, the Arizona Territory. Most importantly, California bankrolled the Union. California gold sent east funded much of the Union Army and was essential to win the war. Disaster struck in 1862 when 10 feet of rain, causing the largest flood to ever hit the West Coast, struck the state. Sacramento, California's capital and second largest city, was inundated by floodwaters, suffering the worst damage. The city was left partially underwater and had to be raised 15 feet after the floodwaters cleared. The capital was even temporarily moved to San Francisco. Overall, 4,000 people, or 1% of the state's entire population, were killed in the Great Flood. That same year, President Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad Act, aiming to connect this disconnected state to the rest of the country with a vital transportation link. The Transcontinental Railroad would bring passengers all the way from Council Bluffs, Iowa, to San Francisco, or rather, as close as they could. Building bridges across the Missouri River and San Francisco Bay was too difficult, so they would start across each body of water in the small towns of Omaha, Nebraska, and Oakland, California. Two lines aimed to meet in the middle. The Central Pacific Railroad left from Oakland. They hired workers for the dangerous, often deadly task of building through the Sierra Nevada, primarily from California's large Chinese immigrant community, who had settled in the small towns of the mountains, where they built Taoist temples like the Joss House, as well as in San Francisco's growing Chinatown. By 1869, they met the Union Pacific at Utah's Promontory Point. The Golden State was now connected to the rest of the country, and with this vital link, the call of Easterners to California would spur the growth and settlement of the entire American West. It would spur the continued growth of Oakland and Sacramento, and solidify San Francisco, already the West Coast's main port of entry, as a major American city. In fact, by 1870, the city by the bay was home to 149,000 people. Just 22 years prior, it had been a small town of less than 1,000. Now it was America's 10th largest city, surpassing even the capital of Washington, D.C., and far and away the largest on the West Coast. Sacramento was the only other city on the West Coast to crack the top 100. With the arrival of the Transcontinental Railroad, California was now linked like never before to the rest of the United States. This connection spurred not only the rise of San Francisco as a major American city, but kickstarted the growth of Southern California as well. The old Spanish pueblo of Los Angeles was Southern California's largest city, but that wasn't saying much. Just 5,000 people lived in the town in 1870. Another town, Wilmington, had been built on a small natural harbor a few miles away, and the port town was connected to the slightly inland Los Angeles by a rail line. This made the town an appealing option for a train south from Oakland, which by 1880 would surpass Sacramento as the state's second largest city. In 1876, the Southern Pacific Railroad reached LA, and more would follow. By 1883, another transcontinental line, this one from New Orleans, now terminated in Los Angeles as well. By the next census in 1890, the once small agricultural town was the second largest in the state, home to 50,000 people. It was a far cry from San Francisco, the country's eighth largest city, boasted nearly 300,000, but for the first time since the gold rush, California had a significant population center in the south as well. With rail lines south to Los Angeles and north to Portland, Oregon, Californians began to move into the Central Valley beyond Sacramento and establish farming communities in the fertile river basin. Towns like Redding, Modesto, Bakersfield, and Fresno were founded as railroad stops and grew as the former miners left the Sierras and planted crops in the surrounding valley. At the same time, with the booming growth of San Francisco, logging took off in Northern California. The industry had developed during the gold rush, and now lumber towns were popping up throughout the forests and wild rivers of the north. Eureka, founded in an unsuccessful attempt to rival the port of San Francisco during the gold rush, boomed with the need to supply the booming city with lumber. Other northern towns like Arcata, Mendocino, Scotia, Fortuna, and Fort Bragg boomed as the northern forests were logged, processed at sawmills, and timber shipped south to San Francisco. This industrial presence took out many of the state's old-growth redwood trees, and some of the tallest and oldest trees on the planet were chopped down in the name of progress. At the same time, a movement to protect the environment and preserve the beautiful landscapes of the West was born in California. In 1864, President Lincoln had set aside Yosemite as a protected area. Though not yet a national park, he would give the valley to the state government as a state park. It was the first time the federal government had ever set aside land for the purpose of preservation, and in that sense it was the forerunner of the first national parks, which would come a few years later. By 1890, Yosemite was added to their ranks as the country's third ever national park. A huge proponent of the park's preservation was John Muir and his San Francisco-based Sierra Club, the first major environmental organization in the world. A friend of President Theodore Roosevelt, Muir would successfully advocate for the creation of several national parks, and is often remembered fondly as the father of the national parks. In 1872, the U.S. waged the year-long Modoc War against the Modoc people of the state's northeastern corner, as the tribe resisted being forced onto a reservation. The Modoc were defeated and forced into reservations in Oregon and Oklahoma. By 1890, California was home to 1.2 million people. In most decades since the gold rush, more people had moved there from China than from any other country or state, and the state had a large Chinese population. Most came from Guangdong, a densely populated coastal province in southern China surrounding the Pearl River Delta that speaks a local regional language, Cantonese. Around the Guangdong city of Taishan, floods led to famine, and poor farmers crossed the Pacific seeking out opportunities in California. Most came to work the gold mines and were later employed constructing the Transcontinental Railroad, but afterwards moved primarily to San Francisco. These immigrants from Taishan, who spoke an entirely different language, Taishanese, continued to settle in San Francisco, and a huge Taishanese and Cantonese-speaking Chinese community grew in the city. These Chinese Californians, though, faced severe prejudice and discrimination within the state, and became the target of fear-mongering campaigns. It culminated in 1882 with the Chinese Exclusion Act, an incredibly discriminatory piece of legislation signed by President Chester Arthur that outright banned and, after 10 years, severely restricted Chinese immigration into the country. From then on, Chinese immigrants to the country and other immigrants from Asia, through which San Francisco became their primary port of entry, would be subject to long interrogations and months-long detentions on Angel Island, where they dealt with far higher chances of being rejected from entry, 18%, than their European counterparts at New York's Ellis Island, just 2% of whom were turned away. Despite all of this, immigrants from China and other Asian countries like Japan continued to make new lives for themselves in San Francisco. Other immigrants came to the state as well. Whalers from the Azores, a Portuguese island chain in the North Atlantic, moved to the San Joaquin Valley and took up farming. So too did Basque immigrants hailing from a coastal region divided between Spain and France. Punjabi immigrants from what is today India and Pakistan went to the Sacramento Valley, where many married into Mexican families, creating a multi-ethnic Punjabi-Mexican culture in parts of the region. In 1885, 3 young princes from the Polynesian island kingdom of Hawaii were attending boarding school in California and went on vacation to the beachside town of Santa Cruz. There they surfed in the ocean and taught a few amazed locals the traditional Hawaiian sport. Locals kept surfing in Santa Cruz, and the sport spread along the beach towns of the California coast, becoming a quintessential part of life in the coastal state. By the late 1800s, farms were continuing to envelop the Central Valley. Water feeding Tulare Lake, the largest lake in the state, was diverted through a number of irrigation canals to feed San Joaquin Valley farms, in a process spearheaded by cotton farmer J.G. Boswell. As the largest lake in the state began to disappear, the land that sat beneath it was turned into even more farmland. By the end of the century, one of the largest lakes in the country had been completely drained. The opposite happened in 1905, when another agricultural project accidentally created a new lake to hold the title of California's largest. Farmers had constructed 2 canals into the Imperial Valley, a large valley in the Colorado Desert. Using water from the Colorado River, they successfully transformed an actual desert into a large swath of farmland. Near the Salton Sink, a desert basin that sat below sea level, the canals were higher up than the surrounding landscape. But after floods on the river caused the water to burst free from the canals, the entire Salton Sink was flooded with water from the Colorado. This new Salton Sea became a popular vacation destination, resort towns like Salton City and Bombay Beach springing up on its shores, until pesticides from Imperial Valley farmers flowing in turned this body of water with no drainage into a polluted, toxic accident. Fish died, locals fled, resorts went out of business, and residents who did stay often deal with serious health conditions. Today it's surrounded by a number of old resort ghost towns and a few small communities like Slab City that bills itself as having no laws. In 1892, a large oil field was discovered just outside Los Angeles, whose La Brea tar pits are home to excellently preserved prehistoric animal skeletons. The already important rail hub now sat at the center of a major orange-growing region. Southern California's citrus farmers, founding what would become Sunkist, turned the LA Basin into one of the country's most important citrus farming centers, while in Northern California, winemakers were planting vineyards, continuing a tradition begun by Spanish missionaries. But this oil find would transform Los Angeles from a regional agricultural hub into a major city. People flocked to LA to cash in on the oil boom, and by 1900, its population had doubled from the decade prior, reaching 100,000 residents. William Mulholland, an Irish civil engineer who served as the city's water commissioner, figured Los Angeles could grow even larger if it had access to a larger, more consistent water supply than that available in the LA River and other nearby waterways. After secretly buying up ranches in the eastern Sierra's Owens Valley, Mulholland began construction on a canal, the Los Angeles Aqueduct, to carry water from the Owens River all the way to Los Angeles. The canal was a death knell for Owens Valley farmers, who attempted several times to blow it up and the so-called California Water Wars. Without water, the Owens Lake dried up, and the Owens Valley transformed into a desert. For LA, though, it was a monumental victory. With a water supply secured, Los Angeles could expand even faster, and had a leg up on other nearby towns, which, if annexed by LA, could have access to its water as well. Los Angeles annexed a number of other cities, from the towns of the nearby San Fernando Valley to the port of Wilmington, and a nearby residential community called Hollywood. Most early films were produced on the East Coast, but Thomas Edison, who on top of the light bulb invented the film camera, held patents on most filmmaking equipment and shut down productions of movies that didn't pay licensing fees. Eager to get out from under Edison's watch, film studios started looking elsewhere. Southern California had great weather, and year-round sun meant movies could be shot all the time. Unlike sunny Florida, it didn't deal with the nuisance of hurricanes, and land on the outskirts of LA was cheap and available. Starting in 1911, in the new neighborhood of Hollywood, film companies set up shop, bought large tracts of farmland, and built film studios. From then on, LA would be the center of the American film and entertainment industries. Like the miners who sought out gold, fame seekers would come to Hollywood, hoping to strike it big on the silver screen. By 1910, Los Angeles was home to more than 319,000 people, and now rivaled its northern counterpart San Francisco's 416,000. Its growth, and the growth of other Southern California towns surrounding it, now pushed the state's population to 2.37 million, now the 12th most populous state in the nation. More people were continuing to immigrate to the state, arriving north from Mexico, from Ireland, Germany and England, and from other countries as well. Italians flocked to the state, settling mostly in San Francisco, where a large Italian-American community developed in the neighborhood of North Beach. Some would later make their way south to San Diego. Armenians moved to the state as well, fleeing genocide back home. Many settled in Los Angeles. A growing population of Jewish immigrants were settling in LA as well. While Los Angeles boomed in population, San Francisco had faced a disaster the likes of which few cities in the world ever have. On April 18, 1906, an earthquake on the San Andreas Fault struck near San Juan Bautista and leveled much of nearby San Francisco. The city had been infilling part of the bay and expanded into areas that were once part of the water. These new additions had particularly weak foundations. The quake ruptured gas lines, causing fires to erupt across the city, while at the same time bursting water lines which could have allowed the blaze to be more easily contained. 80% of California's largest city was burned to the ground, and around 3,000 people were killed, a number thought to be perhaps as high as 6,000. The city, though, was rebuilt, and its remarkable rise from the ashes was on full display at the 1915 World's Fair, which brought more than 18 million visitors to the city. The beautiful Palace of Fine Arts is all that remains of its spectacular fairgrounds. In 1939, the city would host another World's Fair, this time building an artificial island in the bay, Treasure Island, to host it. San Francisco would build its own controversial water project, flooding Yosemite's spectacular Hetch Hetchy Valley to create a reservoir to supply the city. Even today, one of the most controversial water projects in the United States remains California's O'Shaughnessy Dam. This dam, blocking the Tuolumne River in what is today Yosemite National Park's Hetch Hetchy Valley, flooded the Hetch Hetchy and created the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. This valley was considered by many, including John Muir, who lobbied fiercely against the creation of this dam, to be comparable with that of Yosemite Valley. You can see these tops of these granite monoliths and waterfalls sticking out above the water, which give a sense of what the valley once looked like when the canyon floors were visible deep below what's today the surface of the water. This dam, though, is incredibly important to California. It provides water for 2.7 million people in the Bay Area, including the entire city of San Francisco. So it's a critical piece of the state's infrastructure, but it has a long and complicated past, pitting environmental protection against the state's growing population and the need to provide water to its citizens. But it would not be enough to overtake Los Angeles' rapid expansion. By 1920, the city, home to more than 500,000 residents, for the first time surpassed San Francisco as California's largest, a position it would retain ever since. No longer just a regional center, LA was now in the top tier of major American cities. San Diego, the coastal town founded by colonial Spain, was connected in 1919 to railroads north along the coast and east through the desert. And developers began selling plots of land right on the bay, a few miles from the existing town. The town had grown steadily, but with these rail connections and excellent natural harbor of San Diego Bay, it would rise rapidly. By 1920, it reached 70,000 residents. The following decade, it would double to 140,000. In 1927, President Warren G. Harding, visiting San Francisco, died suddenly of what was probably a heart attack, his Vice President Calvin Coolidge assuming the office. California was the country's 8th most populous state, home to 3.4 million people, and more were coming. The Great Depression plunged much of America into poverty, while at the same time an ecological disaster decimated the Great Plains. The dry grasslands of the prairies had been converted into farmland, and as the Depression caused the prices of wheat to crater, Great Plains wheat farmers needed to farm more land in order to stay profitable. Land promoters spread a lie that the rain follows the plow. By farming the land, it would receive enough rain. Of course, that's not how rainfall works, and while more and more of the plains were farmed, a drought kicked in. Strong winds whipped through the region, and this dry, weak topsoil was ripped up, carrying massive dust storms, collectively called the Dust Bowl, across the American prairies. These terrifying storms destroyed farms, caused breathing problems for residents, and upended the livelihoods of farmers already struggling financially in the Great Depression. Millions fled the Dust Bowl, and even today the Great Plains make up one of the most sparsely populated stretches of America. Most set their eyes on California, leaving from Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and New Mexico. They flocked to the farm country of the Central Valley, Salinas Valley, and other agricultural valleys, taking jobs as migrant farm workers. Many got there on a newly built interstate, Route 66. With so many Dust Bowl migrants fleeing Oklahoma in particular, these migrants became nicknamed Okies. It's unclear what that number is today, but by the end of the decade, Okies made up 11% of the state's population, and descendants of these Dust Bowl migrants had a huge impact on the state, especially in the Central Valley. From the 1940s to 1960s, the U.S. implemented the Bracero program, allowing migrant workers from Mexico to work on farms in the United States. Throughout California's history, its southern neighbor had always been one of the countries where most new arrivals came from. But with the Bracero program, Mexican immigration rose significantly, particularly for work in agriculture. 1933 saw the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge, connecting San Francisco to the Marin Headlands on the other side of the Golden Gate. Before its construction, a ferry was necessary to travel between the two peninsulas. It would become one of the most famous landmarks in the United States and arguably the most well-known bridge in the world. In 1932, Los Angeles hosted the Summer Olympics. It was the first of several Olympic Games held in California. Tahoe would host in 1960 and LA again in 1984. With those three, California has hosted more Olympic Games than any other state, and the next Summer Games in 2028 are slated to be held once again in Los Angeles. In 1934, an old Civil War jail on San Francisco's Alcatraz Island was converted into a federal penitentiary. For nearly 30 years, the Rock would hold some of the country's most infamous inmates, like Al Capone, a high-security island prison thought to be the most secure in the nation. 3 inmates famously broke out in 1962, though it's unclear whether or not they survived the swim out of the bay, and they were never found. For 2 years, beginning in 1969, the former prison, which had closed down a few years prior, was occupied by a group of Native American activists. Today, Marin County's San Quentin is one of the most notorious prisons in the country. In 1936, the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech in Pasadena, constructed the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Eventually incorporated into NASA, the JPL today constructs much of NASA's spacecraft and rovers. The Great Depression was followed by the Second World War, and with it, yet another migration into California. Many of the states we've covered so far either lost or gained significant numbers of people during the Great Migration, in which Black Americans fled the Jim Crow South for the industrial cities of the North during the World Wars. During World War I, most Black Southern migrants made their way to the Midwest and Northeast. But World War II brought a second wave of this migration, and with it, many Black Southerners also went to the West Coast, primarily California. Prior to World War I, less than 1% of Californians were Black, mostly descendants of gold miners. During World War II and the decades following, hundreds of thousands of black Southerners went to California, primarily from the states of Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. Most took purchased train tickets west and traveled to the end of the line, and most of the state's growing black population, which reached 6% by 1980, settled in the coastal rail hubs of Oakland and Los Angeles. With mass influxes of residents during both the Dust Bowl and Great Migration, California's population surged, reaching 5.6 million in 1930 and 6.9 million in 1940. At the beginning of World War II, only New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Ohio were home to more people than California. Booming Los Angeles and its 1.5 million residents was the country's fifth largest city, after New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Detroit. LA's infamous smog descended on the city during the 1940s, ushering in an era of horrible air quality. Though its air has improved significantly, it still holds the unfortunate status of having the worst ozone pollution in the country. Central Valley cities like Bakersfield, Visalia, and Fresno today have the country's worst particulate pollution. World War II California was the site of a particularly shameful moment in American history, the internment of Japanese Americans. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, panic spread that if Japan invaded the mainland, Japanese Americans would help them. This racial fear-mongering was completely unfounded. These were patriotic Americans horrified by Pearl Harbor. Many families had lived in the United States for multiple generations, entering through Angel Island in the late 1800s. Despite this, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued an executive order interning most people of Japanese descent who lived on the American West Coast. Outside of Hawaii itself, California had the country's largest and longest established Japanese American population. Most had entered through Angel Island, stayed in the Bay, living in San Francisco or San Jose, moved south with the rise of Los Angeles, or taken up farming in the San Joaquin Valley. About 120,000 people, 2/3 of whom were from California, lost their homes and belongings and were forced, at the hands of their government, to live in squalor in internment camps for the duration of the war, where over 1,000 died of disease, imprisoned without due process. Two of the most notorious camps were located in California, Manzanar in the Owens Valley and Tule Lake near the Oregon border, where Japanese Americans deemed for whatever reason to be particularly disloyal in the eyes of the government were sent. In 1944, the Suisun Bay town of Port Chicago was home to a tragic wartime accident when munitions being loaded onto a ship at the town's naval magazine caused an enormous explosion, killing 320 people. After the war, the Allied powers agreed on the need for an international body of countries to discuss and deal with international issues. In 1945, 50 different countries sent representatives to San Francisco. There, over the course of 2 months, they crafted the Charter of the United Nations, and the UN was born. During the war and the years that followed, many Jewish refugees fled persecution in Europe and immigrated to Los Angeles and San Francisco. Around World War I, San Diego had begun to receive significant investment by the U.S. military. Camp Pendleton was opened just north of the city. The U.S. Navy, in particular, began to operate out of San Diego Bay. The Pacific Fleet was housed there before it was moved to Pearl Harbor, but it remained the headquarters of the Navy's Third Fleet. Important bases and naval stations opened at Point Loma and the resort peninsula of Coronado, turning the San Diego Bay into one of the country's most militarily significant harbors. Military production and manufacturing during the war would boost San Diego's economy and bring even more people to the city. World War II would transform the state like perhaps no other period of time since the gold rush. Already the fifth most populous state in the nation, with its wide open spaces, large coastline, and a war in the Pacific, many Americans who served in World War II were trained in the state's numerous military bases. From the country's population centers in the cold Northeast and Midwest, many came to love the time they spent in sunny, beautiful California. Besides, after the war, programs like the GI Bill stabilized the futures of many young veterans financially. Many Americans had money to afford a big move. Just as important, air conditioning was now widespread in the U.S. Living year-round in a warmer state was much more bearable. The issue of a water supply was taken care of with canals from the Colorado River and its new reservoirs like the Hoover Dam, a new water and electricity supply for LA and San Diego. On top of that, many Americans now owned their own cars, and the freedom that came with an automobile made a move that much easier. Americans flocked to California in droves. Route 66, which traversed the Southwest from Chicago to Los Angeles, became a key route, popular with vacationers and road trippers as well. With the creation of the interstate highway system, getting to California became even easier. Los Angeles, which once possessed an intricate streetcar system, abandoned much of its transit in favor of roads and highways. Millions of people came to California between 1940 and 1950, many young veterans and their families. By 1950, its population surpassed 10 million, and it now ranked as the country's second most populous state, behind only New York. The cities of the Bay were still among the largest in the country. Southern California was booming. Los Angeles was massive, now sprawling across the LA Basin and San Fernando Valley, and beginning to spill into the adjacent valleys of the Inland Empire and stretch down the coast into neighboring Orange County. Long Beach, a city in the LA area surrounding Los Angeles' port, was now home to hundreds of thousands of residents. The film industry in Hollywood had ballooned, and LA was indisputably the global center of movie making. Actors, actresses, and other celebrities made their permanent homes in wealthy neighborhoods and suburbs of the city. Amusement parks began setting up shop, turning it into the theme park hub of the West Coast. Disneyland, Universal Studios, even a local berry stand, Knott's Berry Farm, got in on the action. Today it's home to Legoland, Six Flags Magic Mountain, and a number of other world-renowned amusement parks as well. San Diego, too, is now a major city, and Sacramento remains an important regional center. Stanford University, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, is located in the Bay Area near Palo Alto, partway between San Francisco and San Jose. In the post-war era, some Stanford graduates stayed in the region to start their own companies. One, Hewlett-Packard, was founded in a garage in Palo Alto. In the 1950s, Stanford and Palo Alto built the Stanford Industrial Park, a business park devoted to research and manufacturing. The Shockley Semiconductor Company in nearby Mountain View brought in some of the country's best engineers to the Bay, many of whom left and started their own company, the even more successful Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild boomed during the Cold War, the U.S. government doing lots of business with the company, and dozens of other electronic technology companies moved in, setting up shop in the Stanford Industrial Park. The ARPANET, created there by the Department of Defense, allowed connection between computers in different places. With a message sent between UCLA and Stanford, the Internet was born. With it, computer, internet, and other tech companies continued to start up in the area, such as Apple, Intel, Oracle, Cisco, and Adobe. Cities like Cupertino, Menlo Park, and Mountain View became home to wildly successful tech companies, and others like Google and Facebook were founded there or moved in. The Santa Clara Valley, home to San Jose, became nicknamed the Silicon Valley. In 1958, the credit card debuted in Fresno when tens of thousands of people across the city were mailed one by Bank of America, testing out a system of payment that's now commonplace worldwide. Despite water from the Owens and now Colorado rivers, fast-growing Southern California was once again facing the possibility of running up against its water supply. A massive canal stretching hundreds of miles, the California Aqueduct, was completed in 1968, bringing water from the Sacramento and Feather rivers in Northern California all the way south to the Inland Empire, from where it would supply Los Angeles and San Diego, enabling further population growth. At the same time, the post-war era saw the decline of much of America's manufacturing, as steel, coal, and related industries moved overseas or became more heavily automated, and the country transitioned more broadly to an economy based on services. This hit the country's manufacturing core in the Midwest and Northeast quite hard, and millions of people left industrial regions in the so-called Rust Belt. Many came to the warmer, economically prosperous Sun Belt, including to California. At the 1970 census, for the first time ever, California would surpass New York, which had held the title since 1810, as the most populous state in the Union, a position it has held ever since, its population today near twice as large as in 1970. The boom did not always guarantee success. Built to rival Los Angeles, the desert town of California City fizzled in the sun, and Unable to attract the millions it had prepared for, today its streets and cul-de-sacs wind through the Mojave, never reaching their destination. Alongside new arrivals from other states, immigration into California began to surge in the 1970s after the Immigration and Nationality Act abolished immigration quotas. Armenians continued to move to Los Angeles as the Soviet Union opened up. Following the Iranian Revolution, large numbers of refugees and dissidents from Iran flocked to LA as well, as did a large Korean population. Fleeing the Vietnam War and its aftermath, Vietnamese immigrants began arriving in California in the 1970s as well, settling in Orange County and San Jose in particular. Hmong immigrants, an ethnic group from Vietnam and Laos, fled the war as well, primarily settling in the San Joaquin Valley, Fresno in particular. Filipinos had been coming to California for several decades prior, but immigration from the Philippines surged then as well, and large Filipino communities settled in Los Angeles and the Bay Area. Silicon Valley became a destination for Indian immigrants working in the tech industry. Latinos already made up around a tenth of the state's population. Mexicans, of course, lived in California when it was taken over by the United States, and many more immigrants had moved north to California in the ensuing decades. But immigration from Mexico surged in the 1970s, and each decade since. Mexican immigrants became by far the largest immigrant group in the country, and many moved to California, taking up farm work in the San Joaquin and Salinas valleys, or moving to cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, or the Inland Empire. Immigrants from other Latin American countries joined as well, most notably El Salvador. Following a civil war in the 1980s, many Salvadorans fled unrest back home and relocated to LA. The 1960s and 70s, a period of national, social, and political upheaval, had a number of movements play out in the Golden State. Mass anti-war protests rocked the Bay Area's University of California, Berkeley, while in 1967, across the Bay, some 100,000 young people, members of a broad anti-war, anti-consumerism counterculture known as hippies, descended on San Francisco in what was known as the Summer of Love. Many would settle in California, staying either in San Francisco or moving further north up the coast. This movement and subculture, which strongly shaped the music of the era, continues to influence the culture of San Francisco and Northern California to this day. In the Central Valley, labor leaders Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta founded the United Farm Workers, advocating for the rights of the state's mostly Latino farm workers and organizing mass protests like the Delano grape strike. In Los Angeles, riots broke out in 1965 following the violent arrest of a black man by city police. 34 people were killed in the days of chaos that followed. The neighborhood of Watts was particularly impacted. Even larger riots broke out in 1992, killing 63 people and damaging buildings across the city after city police were acquitted for beating a black man named Rodney King. In 1968, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, brother of the assassinated president, was running for president himself in a chaotic race that had seen incumbent Lyndon Johnson drop out. Kennedy faced a tough race against a number of other major candidates, but the charismatic former New York senator was building momentum. At the critical California primary, he emerged victorious. Giving his victory speech at the Ambassador Hotel in LA, he was shot and killed by a man named Sirhan Sirhan. Coming just 2 months after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, it shocked the nation. In 1975, President Gerald Ford survived 2 assassination attempts in just 2 weeks, one in Sacramento and another in San Francisco. Another shocking series of assassinations would occur in 1978. San Francisco had become the epicenter of America's gay community, and local politician Harvey Milk, a member of the City Board of Supervisors, the equivalent of San Francisco's City Council, was arguably the country's highest-profile openly gay politician. He was assassinated, along with San Francisco's mayor, George Moscone, by a former city supervisor named Dan White in City Hall. The board president, Dianne Feinstein, would succeed Moscone as mayor. In 1976, at a competition in Paris, a panel of prestigious French wine tasters, in a blind judgment, chose winning wines that, to their horror, were not from France at all, but from California. The so-called Judgment of Paris put California wines on the map and cemented Napa as one of the world's premier wine-growing regions. Born in California, the internet was taking off, and internet companies seemed to be starting up left and right in Silicon Valley. The so-called dot-com bubble burst in 2000, causing a pretty significant stock market crash that put a number of these early internet companies out of business. The internet, though, would continue to be an essential aspect of the tech economy, as the rise of California search engine Google would show. Social media companies, countless new apps with the skyrocketing popularity of smartphones, even YouTube, what you're watching this video on right now, started in Silicon Valley. With the rise of artificial intelligence, Silicon Valley company NVIDIA is now the largest in the world by market cap. In fact, 5 of the 10 largest companies by market cap in the world all have their headquarters in Silicon Valley. NVIDIA, Apple, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, Meta, the parent company of Facebook, and Broadcom. A 6th, Tesla, was founded there. In recent decades, California has faced a significant housing and affordability crisis. The state's massive economy and immense concentrations of wealth, it's home to 186 billionaires, more than any other state and any other country besides China and India, coupled with zoning policies making it difficult to build denser housing, an increasingly limited water supply, and ballooning utility and insurance rates due to increased fire danger, have made the state an incredibly expensive place to buy or rent a home. Though housing costs and cost of living have been spiraling nationwide, California is one of the most expensive places to live in the country, surpassed by just Hawaii and Massachusetts. In fact, the 4 most expensive major American cities are all in California. Los Angeles is the 4th, San Diego the 3rd, San Francisco the 2nd, and San Jose the 1st. Hand in hand with this has been a rise in homelessness, another national trend that has hit California particularly hard. 187,000 Californians are homeless, more than any other state. New York is second at 158,000, while Washington, with far fewer, just around 30,000, is third. Most homeless New Yorkers, though, live in shelters, while California has, on top of such large numbers, the highest proportion of unsheltered homeless residents. 2/3 of homeless Californians live on the street, particularly in neighborhoods like San Francisco's Tenderloin and Los Angeles' Skid Row. The cost of living crisis resulted in a brief and very overhyped decline in the state's population during the pandemic, which saw a number of Californians move to other states in the Mountain West. Though these were significant increases for the states they went to, proportionally very few Californians left the state, and growth has resumed as normal. The state is already back to its pre-COVID population. California is home to 4 main urban areas, including some of the largest in the country, helping to make it the most populous of the 50 United States. Leading the way is Los Angeles. If you include the adjacent and fundamentally connected Inland Empire as part of its urban area, Los Angeles and its suburbs are home to 14.5 million people. That's more than all of Pennsylvania, the country's 5th most populous state, and it's about 1/3 of all Californians. This megacity is so large that it includes areas that are quite distinct, from the San Fernando Valley to the Inland Empire to the beach towns of Orange County. The 2nd largest city in the U.S., it's on a tier of its own, shared with only its fellow giants of New York City and Chicago. It's the 5th largest urban area in the Americas, the largest on the Pacific Ocean in the entire Western Hemisphere. Los Angeles is famous for its sprawl, and yes, its physically massive footprint is larger than most, but altogether it's the most densely populated urban area in the country. Yes, its downtown isn't as large as New York or Chicago, but its suburbs, hemmed in by mountains and ocean, are far more tightly packed together than a Westchester County or Naperville. In fact, much of LA's suburbs are very urbanized, often with skylines of their own. Neighborhoods like Century City, Koreatown, and Westwood, to other cities like Glendale and Long Beach, have their own clusters of skyscrapers far from downtown LA. Many were their own distinct towns and cities well before the urban sprawl of Los Angeles encompassed them. Los Angeles has a famous, or perhaps infamous, car culture. The city does have a transit system, but it's far more limited than other cities of its size, and LA traffic has gained quite the reputation. It can take hours to get out of town. Founded by the Spanish, the historic heart of the Pueblo, Olvera Street, sits right downtown. It has a far smaller skyline than New York or Chicago, and even the smaller Miami and Houston, but it still ranks among the largest skylines in the country, tied for fifth with San Francisco. The tallest building in the state and the entire West Coast is LA's Wilshire Grand Center, giving California a tallest building than all but New York, Illinois, and Pennsylvania. Much of the Wilshire is a thin spire, which feels a little like cheating, so if you measure by roof height, it's the third tallest in the state. The iconic U.S. Bank Tower and tall Aon Center are also among the tallest buildings in California, but its skyline is still neck and neck with San Francisco. The center of the global entertainment industry, this Southern California megacity is the headquarters of each of the big five film studios: Universal, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Disney, and Sony, together comprising more than 80% of the American filmmaking market. Countless smaller studios are also located in and around Los Angeles. With that, other entertainers like musicians, theater performers, comedians, talk show hosts, and social media influencers have flocked to Los Angeles to be around other people in the industry, and most American celebrities have moved there. Hollywood and its iconic Hollywood sign are symbolic of the California dream to make it big that has drawn so many to the state. Parts of Los Angeles are incredibly wealthy. Areas like Beverly Hills, Malibu, and the Hollywood Hills are home to some of the richest people in the country, while areas like Skid Row and the south part of the city have been dogged by poverty, homelessness, and gang violence. This isn't unique to LA. Other cities like San Francisco deal with extreme inequality as well, and in rural areas, the differences from town to town, both economically and racially, can be quite stark. Beach towns are often very different from farm worker communities just a few minutes away. Altogether, the state has some of the highest income inequality in the country. With so many movies, shows, vlogs, and music videos filmed there, the City of Angels is broadcast around the country and the world 24/7. Through the city, the California accent, impacted by people from across the country and the world, has been picked up through its vast spread in pop culture as a standard American accent. Though the entertainment industry gets all the attention, the city has a very diversified economy. Maybe surprisingly, it's the largest manufacturing center in the country and is home to many working class people. Surrounding downtown, a huge swath of factories build everything from planes, spacecraft, and satellites to clothes, furniture, and electronics. It's connected to highways, railways, and most importantly, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. The two ports between Long Beach and the LA neighborhoods of Wilmington and San Pedro are among the busiest ports in the country by tonnage, after some of the oil ports of the Gulf Coast, and the busiest if looking at the number of TEUs, standard shipping containers. Los Angeles ranks first by this metric and Long Beach second. Essential for global trade between North America and Asia, they together comprise the fifth busiest container port complex on the planet. All in all, Greater LA has the third largest economy of any metro on the planet, after only New York and Tokyo. The city is the West Coast's amusement park capital, home to Disneyland, Universal Studios, Knott's Berry Farm, Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Legoland, some of the most popular amusement parks in the country. It's famous for its red roof and adobe Spanish-style architecture, common across the south and central coasts of the state, as well as its palm tree-lined beaches. Beach towns and neighborhoods like Malibu, Santa Monica, Venice, Manhattan Beach, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, and Laguna Beach are world famous, and surfing alongside other water sports are wildly popular. Famously, you can surf and ski there in the same day. Ski resorts like Big Bear overlook San Bernardino. The deserts of Joshua Tree and the beautiful Catalina Island both sit a quick day trip out of town. Hemmed in by mountains on almost all sides, there's great hiking and nature all around in mountain parks like Griffith Park, and famous sites like the Getty Villa, Getty Museum, and Griffith Observatory offer sweeping views of the city and the Pacific. It's an incredibly diverse city, a place people from across the country and around the world have made their home. It's home to more Jewish people than any American city besides New York, more Armenians than anywhere outside Armenia, the most Iranians outside of Iran, the country's largest Korean American population, the largest Filipino population in the U.S., the second largest Japanese population outside of Honolulu, and the country's largest Salvadoran population. Mexican Americans are the second largest ancestry group in the country, and Los Angeles has more Mexican people than anywhere outside of Mexico. Angelenos are incredibly diverse. The city has large white, black, Asian, and Hispanic populations, and is home to more Latinos than any other city in the country, despite making up less than 50% of the city's population. Nearby East Los Angeles is 95% Hispanic, the most Latino city in the U.S. outside Puerto Rico. Nearly 4.5 million people in Greater Los Angeles speak Spanish, the most of anywhere outside of Latin America or Spain. Unsurprisingly, California, Los Angeles in particular, has some of the best Mexican food in the country, and the diverse city is home to fantastic food from Asia, Latin America, and around the world. It's among the most visited cities in the country by both American and foreign travelers, contributing to California's status as the most visited state in the nation. Up next is San Francisco, the core city of the Bay Area, home to other major cities like San Jose and Oakland. The Bay's combined urban areas are home to 5.3 million people, making it the 8th largest urban area in the country, after just New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Houston, Dallas, and Philadelphia. The second largest urban area on the West Coast, the city by the Bay was long the beating heart of the Golden State. Its fantastic inland port, the gateway to the state's interior, a key point of entry for fortune seekers during the gold rush, and later immigrants from everywhere from China to Italy. Its Angel Island was the point of entry for most Asian immigration to the U.S., and the Bay today is the country's most Asian American metro outside Honolulu, Asian Americans representing about a quarter of its population. San Francisco's Chinatown, a primarily Cantonese-speaking neighborhood, is the largest Chinatown in North America and the oldest in the country, dating back to the gold rush. It's home to other iconic neighborhoods like the Italian North Beach, Latino Mission District, the Castro, the country's most famous LGBTQ neighborhood, the Summer of Love epicenter of Haight-Ashbury, and the Sunset built atop old sand dunes. Often draped in fog, the famously hilly city sits on a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by the waters of the Pacific, San Francisco Bay, and Golden Gate. The world-famous Golden Gate Bridge connects it to Marin County, and the even longer Bay Bridge takes you to the East Bay port city of Oakland. On the south side of the bay, San Jose is home to more people in its sprawling city limits than the high-density core of San Francisco. San Jose is the center of Silicon Valley, and it and nearby cities are home to most of the largest tech companies in the world. Altogether, this gives the Bay Area the 3rd largest GDP of any metro in the U.S., behind just New York and LA, and surpassing even the far larger Chicago. San Francisco is a major financial center, the largest in the country after New York, and the 5th largest on the planet after it, London, Hong Kong, and Singapore. The tall downtown skyscrapers of the city's financial district are home to the headquarters of major banks like Wells Fargo. San Francisco is tied with its Southern California counterpart for the 5th most skyscrapers in the country, and is home to either the tallest or second tallest building in the state, depending on how you measure it, the Salesforce Tower, alongside other buildings like the iconic Transamerica Pyramid. The oldest major city in the American West, it's easily the most historic large city on the West Coast, home to beautiful Victorian architecture like the Painted Ladies. After Greater Los Angeles, the country's 2nd most densely populated urban area, tall white high-rises and colorful Victorian apartments sit side by side atop the city's hills. The city's steep topography is famous. Its numerous hills mean sidewalks often include stairs and handrails, and you can get great views of the city and the bay from almost anywhere in San Francisco, like the Art Deco Coit Tower or the famously crooked Lombard Street. Piers line the water of the bay, often home to sea lions, from the touristy Pier 39 to the ferry building, the point of entry for many of the ferries crisscrossing the bay. The Bay Area has pretty substantial public transportation. The Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART, has more miles of track than any other public transit system in the country after New York, and has some of the highest ridership in the nation. Of course, there are the city's historic cable cars, which are popular with tourists and run through much of the city center. Driverless taxi company Waymo has used the tech hub as a testing ground for their driverless cars. Surrounded by nature, there are excellent parks in and around San Francisco, From the old grounds of the Presidio near Golden Gate Bridge, home to the magnificent Palace of Fine Arts, to Golden Gate Park, one of the most famous city parks in America, home to museums like the California Academy of Sciences. Arguably, its best park, though, is the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, a federally managed area preserving the Presidio, Angel Island, Alcatraz, the city's ocean beach, as well as stretches of mountains south of the city and across in the Marin headlands, like the redwood groves of Muir Woods. San Jose and Oakland are major cities in their own right, each with their own distinct sense of identity, giving the different parts of the Bay Area very distinct feelings from one another. Oakland has long been a more industrial, working-class city, the end of the Transcontinental Railroad and the Bay's primary port. The Port of Oakland is today the 8th busiest container port in the United States. The college town of Berkeley, home to the flagship campus of the University of California, sits just to its north. The massive San Jose occupies the Santa Clara Valley at the south end of the bay. It and a string of suburbs stretching north to Palo Alto, known as Silicon Valley, serves as the tech hub of the United States, home to many of the largest companies in the world like Google, Apple, and Meta. Though the sprawling city's city limits are home to more people than San Francisco, the city is less densely populated and more residential, with a quiet and pleasant downtown whose low-rise skyline surrounds its old Spanish plaza. The Bay Area is not without its problems. It's an incredibly unaffordable place to live. San Jose and San Francisco rank first and second in the country by cost of living, and it has among the most prevalent homelessness problems, with one of the country's highest rates of homelessness per capita. Despite that, San Francisco is a fantastic American city and personally one of my favorite places in the United States. Traveling south down the coast beyond Los Angeles, we have San Diego, home to 3.07 million people in it and its suburbs. Just across the border in Baja, California, the major Mexican city of Tijuana borders the San Diego neighborhood of San Isidro, home to the busiest border crossing on the continent. Many people frequently cross and visit between the two neighboring cities. San Diego is so close to Mexico, in fact, that Mexico's Coronado Islands, not to be confused with San Diego's own Coronado, are visible from much of the city. The Bayside city's success is thanks to its excellent San Diego Bay, a harbor which the U.S. military made one of its primary naval ports. The military presence is quite prevalent in San Diego. Major bases and air stations are located throughout the San Diego area, and the Coronado Bridge, connecting it to the beachside peninsula known as Coronado Island, is built to be tall enough for battleships to pass under, making a drive across it quite the experience. Coronado's historic Hotel del Coronado is one of the most iconic hotels in the country, a thin sandspit known as the Silver Strand connecting it to the mainland. Beachside San Diego is a popular vacation destination, a Southern California city, a bit quieter than nearby Los Angeles, but still a major city nonetheless, 15th in the country. Palm trees line its sandy beaches, towered over by glass and steel high-rises. Sunbathers relax on the sand while surfers ride the crashing waves of the Pacific. Outside downtown, neighborhoods like Little Italy, Ocean Beach, Pacific Beach, and the iconic La Jolla often feel like beachside villages of their own. Like much of Southern California, Spanish-influenced architecture with whitewashed adobe and red tile roofs are the norm. Another enclosed harbor, Mission Bay, is home to the massive amusement park SeaWorld. The city was actually moved. A new bayside location, once called New San Diego, eventually surpassed the original Spanish site on the San Diego River. Today, this old town San Diego is well preserved, a historic park maintaining the first colonial settlement on the West Coast. Like Los Angeles and San Francisco, San Diego has some amazing parks. Balboa Park is one of the country's very best. The beautiful Cabrillo Bridge leads to El Prado, a complex of Spanish-style museums built for a World's Fair. The country's second largest by size, visitors, and number of animals, Balboa Park's San Diego Zoo is one of the most famous zoos in the world. The hilly peninsula of Point Loma, towering over the city and guarding the mouth of the bay, offers sweeping views of San Diego, Tijuana, and the Pacific, and is home to the Cabrillo National Monument, memorializing the site where Spanish explorers first set foot in California. Finally, we have Sacramento, the largest California city not located right on the coast. The Central Valley city sits at the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers and grew up around Sutter's Fort, the jumping off point to the gold country and the mountains and foothills just outside of town, where suburbs now stretch close to. Sutter's Fort still sits within the city, and its old town on the Sacramento River is home to the city's Gold Rush era waterfront, as well as Tower Bridge, a lift bridge over the river. Today, the Riverside urban area is home to 1.9 million people, 25th in the country and 4th in the state, a major city whose downtown surrounds the beautiful tree-covered state capitol park. Responsible for the governance of 1 in 8 Americans, it's arguably the country's second most consequential center of government after just Washington, D.C., and home to a beautiful, ornate, black and white domed Capitol building. Just outside the city, the Sierra Nevada are not far. The historic mining town of Auburn is just outside the suburbs, and the waters of Lake Tahoe to the east and San Francisco Bay to the west are both about 2 hours from the city. In terms of race, California is easily one of the most diverse states in the country, a place that has been a destination for people from across the U.S. and the world ever since the gold rush. It's one of just a few so-called majority-minority states, places where white Americans make up less than 50% of the population. In fact, California has the country's second smallest proportion of white residents after just Hawaii. With that said, there are more white people in California than in any other state, a testament to just how massive its population is. In fact, by sheer numbers, California is also home to the most Asian Americans, the most Latino Americans, the most Native Americans, and the 5th most Black Americans of any state in the country. Proportionally, 39.8% of Californians are Latino, second to just New Mexico, 34.6% are white, 15% are Asian American, second to only Hawaii, 5% are Black, 4% are multiracial, and 1.6% are Native American. Californians trace their ancestry to countries and ethnic groups from around the world, but the largest are to Mexico, Germany, Ireland, enslaved people from Africa, England, China, the Philippines, and Italy. Unsurprisingly, it's the state with the highest in sheer numbers of countless different ancestry groups. Throughout California's history, it's been the major West Coast center of immigration, and it remains one of the country's top destinations for immigrants today. 27% of Californians, some 10.6 million people, are immigrants, giving it the highest proportion of foreign-born residents of any state in the country. Today, most new immigrants come from Asia, though historically many have come from Mexico. In fact, a third of Californians trace their ancestry back to Mexico, and 26% speak Spanish, giving it the second highest speakership, after Texas, of the country's second most common language. In fact, with large populations fluent in Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, Armenian, Persian, and other languages, it has the highest proportion of residents whose mother tongue is not English. 45% of Californians speak a different language at home. In terms of religion, 55% of Californians are Christian, about half of whom are Protestant and half of whom are Catholic. Additionally, some 2% each are Jewish, Buddhist, and Hindu. California has some of the best food you'll find in the country. Of course, there's few places in the United States to get better Mexican food. Plenty of towns are majority Mexican American, and it's not hard to get some pretty authentic food there. Of course, if you like the more Americanized Mexican food that's popular across the country, that Mission-style cuisine developed in San Francisco's Mission District. There's also the California burrito, a burrito with fries inside that came out of San Diego. Fish or shrimp tacos, which came out of Baja, took root in the state and are incredibly popular. With its long coastline, there's a deep-rooted maritime tradition, and seafood is quite popular. You can get tons of great Chinese, Japanese, and Korean food in California, and a number of California restaurants argue over which one invented the fortune cookie. The avocado-filled California roll is a popular sushi roll that developed in LA. Sourdough bread is from San Francisco. Ranch dressing is from Santa Barbara. The French dip sandwich and Cobb salad trace their origins to LA as well. Ghirardelli chocolate is made in San Francisco. Monterey Jack cheese was invented in Spanish colonial Monterey. The popsicle comes from Oakland. And two popular drinks, the martini and Mai Tai, are both from the Bay. Avocado toast has seemingly swept the nation in recent years, but was created in the state in the 1800s. The state is one of the only places in the country where avocados are grown, and they're incredibly popular as a topping on salads, burgers, and pretty much anything you can put them on. One of the most overlooked aspects of California cuisine is its barbecue scene. With a long ranching history, my home region, the Central Coast, is the birthplace of Santa Maria-style barbecue, a delicious cuisine revolving around slow-cooked tri-tip steak. McDonald's, the largest fast food chain in the country, began in San Bernardino before expanding around the world. But the most quintessential California chain is, of course, In-N-Out Burger, which is practically a way of life there. With settlers to California coming from all over the place, its accent and dialects are influenced by patterns of speech from across the country and the world. But with the rise of Hollywood, the California accent is frequently broadcast across the country, and elements of it are sometimes picked up, especially by younger generations, in places nowhere near California. Vocal fry and uptalk, making statements sound like questions, are perhaps the most distinctive elements of a California accent, but the state doesn't really have a singular accent. There are differences, both in accent and dialect, between Northern and Southern California, as well as across age groups and subcultures, like the famous, or perhaps infamous, Valley Girl and Surfer Dude accents. Few states can claim to match California's impact on music. Surf rock like the Beach Boys, folk artists like Joni Mitchell, psychedelic rock like the Bay Area's Grateful Dead, the West Coast hip-hop scene that came out of Compton in the Bay Area with artists like Tupac and Dr. Dre, have all left their mark on the global music scene. Country music, too, is popular in California. Nearly every genre has been deeply shaped by the Golden State. On top of that, Universal Music Group, one of the country's big three record labels, is headquartered in Los Angeles, bringing a large share of the music industry to California. And countless major musicians settle down in the city with its enormous entertainment sector. Songs like California Dreamin', California Love, Hotel California, to name just a few, are iconic anthems in the state. Outside Lands in Golden Gate Park and Coachella in the Coachella Valley are two of the largest music festivals in the country. California has 19 different professional sports teams, more by far than any other state in the country. I mean, nearly half the states in the country don't even have one. LA and New York are the only two cities in the United States with two teams in each major league. The Los Angeles area has 10 teams. The NFL's Los Angeles Chargers and Los Angeles Rams play at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. The MLB's Los Angeles Dodgers, which just won the World Series, one of the country's oldest and most popular baseball teams, play at Dodger Stadium, and the Los Angeles Angels at Angel Stadium in Anaheim. The NBA's Los Angeles Clippers play at Intuit Dome, and the Crypto.com Arena, still often called the Staples Center, is home to the Los Angeles Lakers, one of the country's most popular basketball teams. The NHL's Los Angeles Kings play at Crypto.com Arena as well, while the Anaheim Ducks play at the Honda Center. The MLS's LA Galaxy play at Dignity Health Sports Park, while Los Angeles FC plays at BMO Stadium. The Bay Area has teams in every league as well, making California the only state with two metros that have teams in each of the Big Five leagues. The NFL's San Francisco 49ers play at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, where this year's Super Bowl will be held, and the MLB's San Francisco Giants play at Oracle Park. The MLB's Oakland Athletics, or A's, the last team left in Oakland after the Warriors moved across the Bay and the Raiders left for Las Vegas, just played their last season in Oakland and are currently playing in Sacramento until they move to Vegas as well. The NBA's Golden State Warriors, another of the country's most popular basketball teams, play at the Chase Center in San Francisco. The NHL's San Jose Sharks play at the SAP Center, and the MLS's San Jose Earthquakes play at PayPal Park. San Diego has two teams. The MLB's San Diego Padres play at Petco Park, and the MLS's San Diego FC plays at Snapdragon Stadium. Besides being the temporary home for the A's, Sacramento has one major league team, the NBA's Sacramento Kings, who play at the Golden One Center. Every year, the iconic Rose Bowl, a stadium in Pasadena, hosts one of the most famous games in college football, the Rose Bowl game. Major newspapers in the state include the country's fourth largest newspaper by circulation, the Los Angeles Times, as well as the San Francisco Chronicle, San Diego Union Tribune, the Orange County Register, the Sacramento Bee, the Mercury News in San Jose, the Press Enterprise in Riverside, East Bay Times in Walnut Creek, the Fresno Bee, the Los Angeles Daily News, and La Opinión, the country's largest Spanish-language newspaper, published in LA. Its busiest airports include Los Angeles International Airport, or LAX, a massive airport that's the fifth busiest commercial hub in the country, San Francisco International Airport, San Diego International Airport, Sacramento International Airport, Norman Y. Mineta San Jose International Airport, John Wayne Airport in Orange County, Oakland San Francisco Bay Airport, Ontario International Airport in the Inland Empire, and Hollywood Burbank Airport in the San Fernando Valley. It's served by a number of major passenger train routes, along with a number of smaller commuter lines like the Pacific Surfliner. Amtrak's Coast Starlight connects LA to Seattle, its Southwest Chief and Texas Eagle run from LA to Chicago, its Sunset Limited connects LA to New Orleans, and the California Zephyr follows the old transcontinental route from the Bay Area to Chicago. There are a ton of major colleges and universities in the state. California has a long tradition of public universities. There's the University of California, or UC system, with its flagship UC Berkeley and other major campuses like UCLA, UC San Diego, UC Irvine, UC Santa Barbara, and UC Davis. The California state system has dozens of schools like Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Long Beach, San Diego State, San Jose State, San Francisco State, and the three polytechnic universities, or Cal Poly schools, in San Luis Obispo, Pomona, and Arcata. On top of that, there are a number of major private universities as well, like the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech in Pasadena, the 7 colleges of the Claremont Consortium outside of LA, Chapman, Pepperdine, and Loyola Marymount universities in the LA area, and the University of San Francisco. Stanford University, near Palo Alto, is one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Some of the largest companies in the world are located in California, including the first, second, and fourth largest in the world by market cap: NVIDIA, Apple, and Alphabet, Google's parent company, all in Silicon Valley. Other major corporations include Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, as well as Visa, Netflix, Taco Bell, Safeway, The Gap, PayPal, Williams-Sonoma, Pinterest, Wells Fargo, Cisco, Roku, Salesforce, Disney, Zoom, Uber, Intuit, Kaiser Permanente, Qualcomm, Reddit, Chipotle, Adobe, DoorDash, Airbnb, Monster Beverage, Ross, eBay, Clorox, Lyft, Mattel, Ghirardelli, Levi Strauss, and of course, In-N-Out Burger. With a GDP of over $4 trillion, California, as many Californians like to brag, is the 4th largest economy in the world, surpassed only by the United States, China, and Germany. This single state has a larger economy than countries like Japan, India, the UK, Russia, or Canada. Most celebrities in the United States live in California, so we're really going to narrow down the list of famous people from there so it doesn't get too out of hand. Some famous Californians include Tom Brady, Bruce Lee, Tiger Woods, Robert Redford, Dr. Dre, Tony Hawk, Barry Bonds, Paris Hilton, Dwayne Johnson, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, George Lucas, Marilyn Monroe, Ice Cube, Van Halen, Steven Spielberg, Olivia Rodrigo, Sally Ride, Robert Frost, Donald Glover, Paul Walker, Zendaya, William Randolph Hearst, Jonah Hill, Julia Child, Snoop Dogg, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Katy Perry, Kevin Costner, Billie Eilish, Kendrick Lamar, Jennifer Aniston, The Black Eyed Peas, Jack Black, Leonardo DiCaprio, Earl Warren, The Grateful Dead, Joe DiMaggio, Tupac, Shirley Temple, Clint Eastwood, Will Ferrell, Tom Hanks, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Dustin Hoffman, Steve Jobs, Angelina Jolie, the Kardashian and Jenner family, Jack London, the Olsons, George Patton, Jackie Robinson, and John Steinbeck. 2 Californians have been elected President of the United States. Despite the state's blue reputation, both have been Republicans. Richard Nixon was born in Yorba Linda, then a small farm town that within his lifetime would become a suburb of LA. He would serve in the House of Representatives for a Southern California district, where he gained a reputation as an ardent anti-communist. He was then elected as one of California's senators before he was picked to be Dwight Eisenhower's running mate in 1952. They would win 2 terms, and Nixon became the second youngest vice president in history. He became the Republican nominee for president in 1960, but lost an incredibly narrow election to John F. Kennedy, a defeat that would make him increasingly suspicious and paranoid. 2 years later, he ran for governor of California, but lost to Pat Brown. His political career was thought to be over, but in 1968, he ran for president and won in an era of increased political mistrust and chaos. Nixon won a second term, but was destroyed by the disclosure of secret tapes proving that he had attempted to cover up the fact that his aides had ordered a campaign of espionage against his political opponents, including most infamously a bungled break-in to the Democratic Party headquarters at Washington, D.C.'s Watergate Hotel. In 1974, he would become the first and only president to date to resign from the office. His presidential library is located at the site of both his birthplace and grave in Yorba Linda. Not long after, another California Republican would be elected to the nation's highest office. Ronald Reagan was born in Illinois but moved to LA for a career in the movie business. He became a fairly popular actor and TV show host, but began making a foray into politics after he was elected president of the Screen Actors Guild, a major union representing film industry workers. A popular public speaker, a speech at the 1964 Republican National Convention made him a key voice of the conservative movement, a burgeoning right-wing political movement within the Republican Party yet to really secure the presidency. In 1966, he was elected governor of California, defeating Pat Brown, the man who beat Nixon, and cementing himself as the de facto leader of the conservative movement. Running for president 2 years later, he lost the primary to Nixon, but by 1976 mounted a primary challenge to Nixon's successor, incumbent Republican President Gerald Ford. Ford only narrowly beat this conservative challenger, and by the next election in 1980, Reagan finally secured his party's nomination and defeated President Jimmy Carter in the general election. Reagan would serve 2 terms, ushering in a conservative takeover of the Republican Party known as the Reagan Revolution. Nicknamed the Great Communicator, he would win over many voters, sweeping 49 states in his 1984 re-election. The impacts of his agenda of economic deregulation and socially conservative policy have been criticized by his detractors and praised by his supporters, but most agree that he ranks among the most influential presidents in recent American history, his presidency continuing to shape American life today. He is buried at his presidential library in the LA suburb of Simi Valley. Additionally, Herbert Hoover was born in Iowa and moved around frequently throughout his career, even working as a miner in the Sierra Nevada, but spent a good bit of time living near his alma mater of Stanford and kept a house there throughout his time in politics. On top of that, a number of major political figures in recent years have been from California. Kamala Harris served as the state's Attorney General and represented California in the Senate before running for president in 2020. Though she lost in the Democratic primary to Joe Biden, Biden picked her as his running mate, and the pair won, making Harris the first woman in American history to serve as vice president. Running for re-election in 2024, Biden dropped out well into the general election campaign, following a disastrous presidential debate performance that further elevated concerns about the oldest president's fitness to serve. Endorsing Harris, she quickly secured the party's nomination and ran a 3-month sprint for the presidency, eventually losing to Donald Trump. Additionally, 2 recent speakers of the House have been from California. Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy represented Bakersfield in the House and briefly served as Speaker until his ouster in 2023. Democrat Nancy Pelosi, who represents San Francisco, served as House Democratic leader for 2 decades, serving twice as Speaker. The first woman elected Speaker of the House, she was long considered among the most influential political figures in the country in recent years. California has more electoral votes than any other state in the country, making it a key political player. It is the biggest blue state in the country, often providing the largest share of votes for the Democratic candidate for president. Though with such a large population, it tends to provide more votes for Republican candidates than most other states. Democratic candidates typically win California by pretty large margins, and in recent years, it has almost never been competitive in a national election. It has a Cook PVI, or Partisan Voting Index, of D plus 12, meaning in a given year, the Democratic nominee for president tends to win by about 12% more in California than they do nationwide, making it one of the bluest states in the country. The state has a number of fairly unique political traditions. Ballot measures, or referendums, are votes on statewide issues put directly to California voters. Californian voters often decide directly whether new laws or constitutional amendments affecting them will pass, and can even veto laws enacted by the state legislature. These measures can be placed on the ballot even without approval by the state government. Some laws even require this type of vote in order for them to pass. It's a form of direct democracy more built into state politics than in many other states. Additionally, it and North Dakota are the only two states to ever successfully recall a governor. Californians recalled Governor Gray Davis in 2003, electing actor Arnold Schwarzenegger in his stead. Additionally, it's one of just a few states that uses a top two primary system for every race other than presidential elections. This means that all candidates, Democrats, Republicans, and otherwise, compete in a single primary, and the top two winners advance to the general election. Sometimes this leads a Democrat and Republican to face off, but in this deep blue state, sometimes general elections see two Democrats running against each other in the general election. It has 54 electoral votes, more than any other state, and sent a whopping 52 representatives to the House of Representatives. Of them, 43 are Democrats and 9 are Republicans. Its two senators, Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff, are Democrats, as is its governor, Gavin Newsom, a major national political figure thought likely to run for president in the near future. That is it for California. Get excited because up next we've got another state I used to call home, the great state of Minnesota. If you're from Minnesota, please respond to my community post or my comment here to let me know what you'd like to see included about your home state. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who's already joined my Patreon. Through it, you can access different things such as quarterly channel newsletters, thumbnail previews, early access to maps I create, and shoutouts in my videos such as these. Also, please subscribe to my brother's channel, Quinn the Cameraman. He made the great intro at the beginning of this video that I'll use in all the US Explained videos, so go show him some support. I tried to be pretty thorough with this two-part video, but I know there were definitely things I missed as there was a ton to talk about. I want to give a big thank you to everyone from California who helped give me information for this video. I truly would not have been able to make this video without all your help. I really enjoyed spending time in California as part of my 6-month-long filmmaking trip across the country. From here on out, every single video in the US Explained will feature on-site clips and footage I filmed in that state. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned something new. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover the countries, cities, people, and places of the world and beyond. These videos will leave you saying, that is interesting.